Hello writers, and welcome back to my life. It's Writer Wednesday, the day where I give you my tips and advice on the art and the business of writing, tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. This week's question comes from my patron Kakirtog, who asked a question about the Harry Potter series. I've spoken before on this channel, and I speak very explicitly in my emails to my email list about the trope of the chosen one in fiction, and particularly fantasy, and how I don't really like it, and Kakirtog pointed out that, but Harry Potter is also kind of a chosen one, and could I maybe talk about that? So for anyone who doesn't quite know what we're talking about, the trope of the chosen one is basically where the hero of the story is the hero because they have been chosen to be the hero by prophecy, by external forces of fate beyond their control. They are literally chosen to be the hero, and this is very, very common in fantasy. The Wheel of Time series, the Sword of Truth series, Game of Thrones, and yes, the Harry Potter series all have protagonists who are the chosen one. And yeah, I kind of hate this trope. I mean, if you have to be the hero of the story because literally fate or God or whatever said that you have to be, then it's not very impressive to me when you are the hero. Because you have to be. You can't not be. What's interesting about the saturation of prophesied heroes in fantasy fiction in particular is that the grandfather of epic fantasy, The Lord of the Rings, didn't have a prophesied hero at all. I mean, maybe it did in Aragorn, but Aragorn wasn't the protagonist of The Lord of the Rings. The hobbits were, and Frodo in particular. And what's amazing about Frodo is that he isn't some prophesied, storied hero. He's just a guy who happened to be given a ring by Bilbo, who just happened to stumble on it in the dark, but they both choose to do the right thing. Yes, there is a moment in The Lord of the Rings where Gandalf indicates that, maybe Bilbo was meant to have the ring, and in that case, Frodo was also meant to have it, but that's more of like a general sort of like, hey, this is probably all gonna work out for the best, rather than some prophecy saying, you are the hero who will defeat the Dark Lord. And that also ties into the very unique theme and messaging of Lord of the Rings that one individual amazing great man is less powerful than a series, like a group of people who all choose to do the right thing individually. But that's a whole nother video. We'll talk about that some other time. And what ticks me off about fantasy ever since Lord of the Rings is that it is written about men like Aragorn rather than people like Frodo. To me, heroism is that much more awesome and impressive, and I love to read about it if it is a choice. If somebody becomes a hero not because they're like some amazing warrior and they're the only one who can defeat the bad guy, but just because they're there. They are in the place where the bad thing is happening, and if they don't take up the mantle, no one will. Okay, so Harry Potter. Harry Potter is chosen by prophecy, right? So do I dislike the Harry Potter books or movies or whatever? Of course not. And in fact, Harry Potter is one of the most excellent examples that you can do basically anything in writing if you do it well. I mean, taking it to the extreme, you can even be sexist and racist in your writing and still create a good story, particularly by turning that on its head and using it to make a point. That is the entire field of satire. That's what it's all about. And no, Harry Potter isn't satire, but it does turn the whole trope of the chosen one on its head. Because remember, Harry Potter was one option in the prophecy, and the other option was Neville Longbottom. Voldemort heard the prophecy, knew it applied to one of the two boys, and just immediately assumed that it was Harry Potter, because how could the Longbottom boy ever be a threat to the Dark Lord? But because he attacked Harry, he literally turned Harry Potter into the one person who could defeat him. Voldemort screwed himself by putting too much faith in the prophecy and created the means to his own downfall by doing so. And that is a brilliant take on the whole chosen one idea, because who chose him? Not prophecy, not God, freaking Voldemort! Does the Harry Potter series still rely on a lot of the storytelling conventions and tropes that, like, the Chosen One usually uses? Yes, it does. Harry still doesn't really have much choice about whether he wants to be the series' protagonist or not. He doesn't do the good things he does purely out of the goodness of his own heart. He does so at least partially because Voldemort will literally kill specifically him if he doesn't, rather than just like, oh, you know, he will kill everyone and that happens to include me. No, he will kill you, Harry Potter. But within that framework, Rowling does an incredibly good job of playing around with some of the ideas and the concepts of the chosen one in a fantasy story. And on top of everything else, senior to all of the rest of it, she tells a really, really good story. And if your story is good, you can get away with a lot. And that is it for this week's topic. A big thank you to Kakirtog for the question. I hope you found the answer helpful. If you are watching this, remember that my $5 patrons on Patreon are the ones who get to ask the questions that I answer in this video series, and they also get all of the Writer Wednesday videos 2 weeks before they go public on the channel. So if you want to check that out and become a patron, click on the Patreon link in the description below. Tune in next week where we will be talking about how I created my fantasy voice that I use in my books and how I keep it consistent as I continue to write them. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to my patrons for their incredible support, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!